everyone, and welcome to Booming Encore's Learning Bites. My name is Susan Williams, and I'm the founder of Booming Encore. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Deborah Morgan, a researcher from Swansea University. Dr. Morgan has completed some extensive research work in the topic of loneliness, and even actually shared some of her results and insights and observations in a recent TED Talk entitled A Life Less Lonely. Today, she's going to be talking with me about loneliness and the impact it can have on a person's ability to positively age. So welcome, Dr. Morgan.
Hi.
So Dr. Morgan, how would you actually define loneliness?
Loneliness is a subjective experience. So it's a situation that's experienced by the individual where there is, how would you describe it? It was an inadmissible or undesirable lack of quantity or quality of social relationships. So what this actually means sort of in reality is the number of social relationships, their existing relationships, may be smaller than they'd like or would want to admit to, or they don't feel as closely connected, that intimate connection with the people around them as they would like.
Now, often people will say loneliness and isolation and define them as the same thing. Are they the same thing or are they something different?
They're related concepts, but they are very different. So, as I said, loneliness is a very subjective experience. It's how you feel and perceive your social network around you. Whereas social isolation is a more objective measure, and it's related to the absence of contact with other people. Okay. So what it means in reality is you can be lonely but not isolated. You could be isolated but not lonely, or you can experience both at the same time.
Okay, and in your research on loneliness, what were some of the top findings you discovered?
One of the big things for me was we don't really understand, we've never really understood why some people recover from loneliness and other people go on to become chronically lonely. And what I found was that loneliness, regardless of the person's pathway through loneliness, was experienced as a disruption, a biographical disruption. It effectively punctuated their life course into before and after the trigger events. And what this meant for the individual, they lost their sense of self, their self-identity. So it might be a valued identity, they might have lost a partner, so they might have lost their role as a wife or a husband. It disrupted their expectations they had about their relationships with those around them. So I had a number of older adults who'd gone through late life divorces, and that trigger was the trigger point for their loneliness. But they experienced that because they had expectations about their marriage lasting for a long period of time until the end of their life, and obviously that wasn't the case. But it was also about their expectations of family and friends. So they might expect in a time of crisis that family and friends would rally around them. And that didn't always happen. So it disrupted that sort of element. And what we found was when some people were very proactive. They found that they could overcome loneliness. They were very convinced that it was something that could be alleviated and it was within their power. So they took a very proactive approach to addressing loneliness themselves. They joined clubs. One woman got together a group of women in a similar position as herself. She was a widow, so she got other single widowed women to go out with. Whereas the people who were chronically lonely, for them, they internalized the root cause of their loneliness. They believed it wasn't something that they had the power to overcome. So they attributed it to things like being shy or introverted. They just felt it was a thing. It's something that happens as we age, that we're likely to become lonely, which obviously isn't true, because the vast majority of older people never become lonely.
Okay. So how does loneliness actually affect a person's mental and physical health?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people spoke about the mental impact, about being very, very depressed, as you would expect, becoming very anxious about going into social situations. I mean, existing research has also found that there may be a link to cognitive impairment, to dementia. So there was a study done quite a few years ago now that found that people, they were reporting symptoms of cognitive impairment, but when they examined their brains post-mortem, there were none of the underlying clinical signs. So they concluded that it's actually loneliness giving them the symptoms of memory loss.
Okay.
And
And like we hear a lot about, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just saying in terms of the physical health, I mean, there are a lot of studies, epidemiological studies, that suggest that loneliness can have a long-term impact on your health because it's a stress, so it raises your stress levels, which means your cortisol levels rise. You might have high blood pressure, which in turn can impact on the cardiovascular system. And some people self-medicate with either with food or with alcohol. So of course that has an impact on your health as well.
Yeah, yeah, I can just imagine. Now, we often hear a lot about technology and how technology can help with, fending off loneliness. What's your perspective on this?
From the work that I did, the people who, older adults were using, they were using technology, a small number of them were using it, but they were using it in a way to maintain contact with dispersed family members. So rather than phone, say, their daughter twice a week, they were now perhaps Skyping or texting, but it wasn't increasing the amount of social contact they had.
Okay.
So it was having a very limited effect on their loneliness because they weren't using technology to widen that social network. They were just using it to maintain contact with the people who were already in what was already maybe a very small network.
Okay. So what actions could someone take today if they're currently lonely, or also to try and fend off loneliness in the future?
I think we all need to be very aware of the trigger points of loneliness, and there are many, especially as we get into later life. Those key transition points such as driving, poor health, becoming a carer, moving. Very often people move to a new area when they retire and think it's going to be fantastic, but actually find that it can be a trigger point for loneliness and isolation. So I think we need to think about that, and perhaps we tend as we get older to put money into a pension pot and prepare for our financial futures, but we don't consider our social futures. So we might
developing a social network before you actually need it is probably critical, is it not?
Yeah. So how often do any of us think about our social networks? We don't until we don't have one anymore. So
or they're tied to our careers, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think we all need to think about our social networks and how we will connect to people once we perhaps made that move into retirement, or there's some sort of change in our circumstances.
Now, as a result of your work, have you actually personally changed anything?
I've become very aware. I mean, I've experienced loneliness myself when I was much younger. When I was a young mum, and I saw the impact of it on my grandmother. But doing this research has made me hyper aware, I suppose, of loneliness. And so if I'm in the supermarket and somebody's in front of me and they're taking a long time at the checkout, I'm very conscious that person behind the checkout may be the only person that they've had contact with for that week. So I'm less impatient if I'm in a queue. And I also tend to put my phone down more on public transport because you connect to people more, because you never know who's around you that actually may be very lonely.
No, some very good thoughts and things for us to definitely consider. So thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge and your insights with us on this very important topic. And I'm really hoping that as a result of our chat today, people will actually start to take a look at their own lives and the impact that loneliness can have, especially as you get older, and possibly inspire them to take some actions now so that they can possibly avoid this in the future. So to everyone out there, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope that each one of you are living your best booming encore. Bye, everyone.